one of the important planning principles for Southeast Falls Creek generally is to try to preserve some of the historical fabric of this area. This area was an important working class industrial area, and so this project we're very excited about because it is trying to conserve some of that history.
People first came to Vancouver in the 1860s because the biggest trees in Canada grew in Vancouver. So the very first thing here was a sawmill. The amount of manufacturing in Vancouver doubled in the early years of the decade. At the turn of the century, and this building is sort of part of that new phase where they started to manufacture equipment for the mining industry, for the fishing industry, for the logging industry here in Vancouver. So Falls Creek, although it was lined with about 20 sawmills, it actually was full of metal working facilities such as this.
It's a very important building in terms of the heritage in that area, and as an early industrial building in the city of Vancouver. So there are not many of these buildings left. Most of them have been torn down. So I think there's a general agreement amongst everybody in the community and amongst professionals, and certainly at City Hall, that if we can preserve it, we should. What's great about it is it's got these huge internal spaces in it and fabulous heavy timber. You know, in those days there was lots of fur around, and they could just cut it down and use it just exactly the way it came out of the forest. So the timbers in there are just magnificent. It's very simple architecturally, just really two long shed buildings, and ideal for conservation and changing into mixed use.
Another unique feature of the building that's going to be retained is the large overhead crane at the end of this passageway. And I've never seen a crane like that before, really. It's instead of having a big iron beam, which you might expect in a foundry, it's got a massive Douglas fir beam supporting the crane. That's very interesting. Now that's going to be retained in the lobby of the building, I believe, and that actually will be a terrific way of remembering the building and its function.
Originally there was some forging going on there with open fires and braziers in there, so those ventilators let the smoke out. We're going to keep those and convert them, and there'll be little bedrooms with views out over the city.
These buildings, to me, are like having grandparents. It shows you where we've come from and who we are. And it's easy to forget in this fast-changing world. The lives that our parents lived and our grandparents lived were in these buildings, and this was normal back then. Working in this building in the 1920s would be the same as sitting behind a computer today. We've discovered the attic where they've stored a lot of their castings, from at least the equipment they're using to make the castings, the molds and so forth. It's interesting. It's old, it's wet, the sun's now come out, the fog's burnt off, and it looks like we've awakened some of the ghosts of the last century.
We have to take the building apart, store it off-site, but it's a bolted together building. It's uniquely the way it's put together with large bolts and connections and so on. So we'll take it apart, excavate the site, store it off-site, excavate the site, build parking, and then literally put it back together on top of the parking garage, which will then be invisible. Bolt it back together. We'll number all the parts and we'll store them properly, and when we put it back together, of course, we'll add seismic bracing in so it'll be earthquake-proof.
This project is going through a heritage revitalization agreement, and the basic idea is that to help offset the cost of retaining the heritage structure, the city will look at increasing the amount of allowable density on the site. So in the case of this project, they are proposing a residential tower and a density that would be higher than other sites in the area.